So good evening, everyone. This is Chris McLeod, City Planner for the City of Sterling Heights. First of all, we're going to get started here. So first of all, let me thank you for taking some time out of your schedules. I know this time of year is busy for everyone. So we'll try to keep everything succinct tonight and keep this to about an hour and a half, I think we're scheduled for. So just a brief overview of kind of where this all kind of came from and where it's going. So this area, this mile or about a mile and a half, 1.3 mile stretch of Van Dyke from 18.5 Mile Road to basically the city of Utica on both sides of the Van Dyke. This area is our Corridor Improvement Authority. This Corridor Improvement Authority was developed back in 2006. Obviously, at that point, we were experiencing the recession or the downturn, but the city went ahead and established this tax increment financing district for this particular area. So that way, when the recession came out, the hope was that it would stimulate development. We have seen some of that since that time. But with that being said, the city wanted to further help energize and to guide potential redevelopment for this area. So the best way that we thought we would do that is to lay out a very thoughtful and thorough roadmap or master plan for this area. And that's obviously what we're doing here as part of this project. The city has hired Design Workshop and Manic Smith. They were hired this past summer, late summer. And since that time, we have gone through a series of data collections, site visits, community workshop, focus groups to get to this particular point. This effort tonight will obviously continue that. You'll hear some of the findings that the team has found, as well as some of the design concepts that they are going to be proposing or potentially proposing to move this master plan forward. So with that being said, I will turn it over to the Design Workshop team. Specifically, Manisha can take us from this point and get us into the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us this evening. We are using a few new tools today. Chris had previously put on the screen some of the basic tools that we'll be using. Feel free to enter your comments or questions as we go through the presentation today in the chat box. And during the time that you're muted, feel free to use the chat bot. We'll be monitoring it for questions and comments, and we'll be collecting both verbal and written feedback today. And if you need to leave, the red button there will disconnect you from the meeting. We hope you stay though for the entire length of the time. So moving on, welcome. My name is Manisha Kaul. I am a principal at Design Workshop. The Design Workshop team, in addition to our partners at the City of Sterling Heights, is being led by Kurt Culbertson, and our project manager is Chris Freda. You'll be hearing from Chris shortly. We're also joined by Manic Smith Group with Wendy and Jean Hartline as the transportation engineer, and they're closely looking at traffic and mobility related issues within the project area and any impacts that our potential recommendations may have on the surrounding area. I also want to take a minute to remind everyone that your go-to location for all updates and materials related to this master plan effort is www.sterling-heights.net/VDA. And once you enter the site, you will have all the links that you need to stay on top of the information and stay engaged in the process for this project. Next slide, please. So in today's agenda, we will cover where we are in the planning effort for Van Dyke Avenue Master Plan. We will summarize the findings and from the questions that we asked the participants at the first workshop. We will also explore the multimodal opportunities and possibilities along Van Dyke. Chris will then present some redevelopment concepts, including branding option. And our goal is to have a Q&A session at the end. It is here that we'll solicit your feedback and preferences for the concepts, specifically the concepts presented today. But as I said earlier, feel free to add your comments and questions in the chat box as we go along. So for the benefit of those that may be joining us for the first time today, I would just take a minute to recap what we're studying as part of this master plan effort. We're studying the economic and market impacts, making right-of-way reconfiguration recommendations, and coming up with conceptual redevelopment alternatives for the Van Dyke Avenue project area. The alternatives will be vetted with stakeholders and the community, and a preferred alternative will be presented. Based on the preferred alternative, we will recommend identity and branding ideas, phasing and implementation to make this visionary plan a reality. And all these steps are meant to ensure that a future Van Dyke Avenue plan is not only visionary, but is implementable. So overall project schedule is outlined in the next slide here. You will see we're getting closer to the end of the study. We will be delivering a final plan in February 2021. We've already completed the project kickoff in September, the first community workshop where we presented the community with the findings of our research and analysis and gathered your thoughts about what you all envisioned for the future of this corridor and district. And today we are facilitating a second community workshop to get your feedback on the redevelopment concepts and branding ideas that our team has been working on. First of all, I just want to immensely thank every one of you that has participated in guiding the vision of this master plan thus far and giving us valuable feedback that has helped us develop some of the concepts that we will be presenting today. We look forward to your continued involvement in this process. So what did we hear from the community during and after the last workshop that we conducted? And this was during the workshop as well as any feedback that we may have collected after the workshop through surveys and mapping. So we asked you, which of these options do you consider to be appropriate for repurposing the sections of Van Dyke Avenue right-of-way? And the top three that the community favored were restaurant and cafe spillout space, plazas and gathering spaces, followed closely by pedestrian and environmentally friendly green streets. We then asked about the kind of outdoor activities you would like to participate in along a transformed Van Dyke Avenue. And the graphic to the right is a collage of all the responses that we received from you all. As you can see, there are some more favored activities that jump out are dining, beer garden, shopping, concerts, nightlife, etc. This was an open-ended question so that we could get your feedback on all the possibilities that you envision here. We then also asked about the kind of parks that were most needed in and around the Van Dyke area. And a lot of people favored the nature, park, garden areas, followed by pocket parks and community parks. When asked what kind of retail experience is Van Dyke Avenue right for, many favored a local maker vibe, very consistent with the character of the businesses that are thriving along the avenue today. And this was followed closely by a Main Street type quality that could also have dining, nightlife. Next slide. We presented you all with a number of scenarios for potential development character that was feasible and appropriate along the avenue. And as you can see, a large section of people that responded favored a mixed-use character with ground floor retail, followed by townhomes and a small scale retail as well. Again, all the essential ingredients for a more urban scale development were found in the community's responses. When we asked another open-ended question about the kind of facilities that are lacking today on Van Dyke Avenue and will likely be a positive addition in the future, we received a lot of great feedback. Some of the things that jump out, and you can see in the graphic on the right, are maker spaces, recreation center, museum, entertainment, parks, retail, library, and a lot of other great ideas interspaced between them. We studied the Van Dyke Avenue corridor in greater detail and evaluated all the opportunities for change that will support the community vision that I just went over with the questions and the feedback that we received. The first of those was to review what were the opportunities for configurations within the Van Dyke Avenue. And in order to support an environment that is pedestrian friendly, that also addresses safety concerns, we recommended first to complete the sidewalk network. In addition to filling in the missing portions, which if you recall from a previous analysis, that there were several locations along Van Dyke Avenue itself that had missing pieces of pedestrian walks, we think that the low-hanging fruit would be to connect this network and not just connect this network fully, but also extend the pedestrian connections into the neighborhoods where they're currently missing. This will allow easy access to connect to the surrounding neighborhoods and vice versa, connect the surrounding neighborhoods easily into the newly formed Van Dyke core. In addition, we also recommend pedestrian connections to the Clinton River Trail system. And some of these may exist at this time, but we'd like to emphasize easy connections that are also can incorporate amenities at these nodes. There are a number of stakeholders and community members that said that incorporating a bike network will not only make the ease of residential access on Van Dyke possible, but also facilitate connecting some of the regional assets, like north on Utica could be connected to Utica Town Center and Jimmy John's Field, and similarly a bike trail on Utica South would connect all the assets in the south, like Dodge Park and the Municipal Center, where the city has made significant investments in the recent past. Another strategic impact can be achieved by looking at reapportioning the Van Dyke Avenue right-of-way. There is a potential to shrink the vehicular lanes north of the 19-mile road to achieve more area for bike lanes and pedestrian amenities like trees, plazas, etc. And the side-by-side plans indicate the area where we are recommending, or the exact location where we're recommending the change within the project area. Now, outside of the project area, the changes that were recommended are shown in dashed lines, since these are the ones that we'll be talking to our immediate neighbors, like the city of Utica, to see how we can make some of these changes feasible also. So the change in the right-of-way that we're recommending is from the 19-mile road to Canal Road. This can be achieved without significantly impacting vehicular movement and flow. And I would like to preface the conversation by saying that we are in the process of discussing these recommendations with County Planning and Roads, and will incorporate their recommendation into future proposals. The benefits of travel lane reduction will allow for a number of things. I will highlight some of these benefits in greater detail in just a minute. The plan on the right shows the lane reductions that can be reconfigured as pedestrian spaces to include a collection of pedestrian comfort amenities, accommodate safety, provide for economic development opportunities, etc., all of which will have an impact on the overall development of this project area and the Van Dyke Avenue corridor. So the typical condition that exists along Van Dyke Avenue today is shown here, is roughly 120 feet wide right-of-way with a very wide development setback. Next slide. So the challenges that we see with this right-of-way that impact the urban design qualities of the space, firstly is the vast face-to-face development distance, which negatively impacts the scale of comfort. So for pedestrian comfort, it's really recommended to create a scale of space that makes the user comfortable. In addition to that, there are wide pedestrian crossings without a respite, so it's not very comfortable for pedestrians to cross from one side of the street to the other. Now, it could be currently, there are missing pieces. We don't find a whole lot of pedestrian, and there are a number of reasons that could be attributing to pedestrians not using the space very actively. Thirdly, there are wide empty setbacks, and this gives us an opportunity to think about how can these spaces become something else. In addition, there are more travel lanes than necessary for traffic volume at this time. And there's also a lack of bicycle infrastructure, which I pointed out earlier the community pointed out could be something that could be incorporated within the future vision of Van Dyke Avenue. So we came up with a couple of possible alternatives for how we could reportion the space that currently exists on Van Dyke Avenue to make it more pedestrian friendly, to make it more comfortable for pedestrian, and to accommodate safety. So firstly, we recommend a tighter face-to-face development distance. So in other words, the area that you had been previously seeing as setbacks could be taken over by development. What this would do would allow for a more scalable space for pedestrian comfort. It would allow for space. We're recommending a turn lane in the middle that could also accommodate a planting median where possible. We're recommending a wide and flexible public sidewalk with a private patio zone in areas where we had retail opportunities. We're also recommending, within the same right-of-way distance, a protected bike lane in either direction, one on each side of the street. Now, this is also accompanied by a reduced travel lanes and bulb outs to not only calm traffic down, but also create a better pedestrian environment. In addition to this, we can have comfortable planting aisles and amenity zones for the public right-of-way. In addition, we can also accommodate street parking to support the retail and increase densities within these newly developed zones. Now, there is a second alternative as well, which is slightly different from the previous one that I just shared with you. What this alternative also allows for us is to, with a slight increase in the existing right-of-way from 120 to 122 feet, we can accommodate within the public right-of-way comfortable planting zones and amenity spaces, street parking to support retail and increase densities, reduce travel lanes to calm traffic and create a better pedestrian environment, and also accommodate safety, and a linear park on one side of Van Dyke Avenue that can provide vegetation, connective green space, and can also accommodate a multi-use path alongside that can be used by, can be shared by bikes, can be shared by pedestrians. In addition to that, both sides can allow for wide and flexible public sidewalks as well as private patio zone. Now this, in addition to the recommended development within the originally setback distances, will again allow for tighter face-to-face development distance, making it a more urban friendly, pedestrian friendly street. I will now pass it on to Chris Freda, who can talk about the conceptual redevelopment alternatives that our team's been working on.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Manisha. And I join my partners in this effort in thanking all of you for participating in this community workshop. We're really excited to put these ideas in front of you, show you the evolution of the work so far, and collect your feedback and your own ideas about how to shape this district for the future. I will note, we tried to condense the amount of material that we reported back to you from the first workshop, as well as the evolution of the streetscape design, since we did spend so much time on those last time we spoke to you all. But I will note that we'll be posting this entire workshop presentation, every one of the slides that you're seeing here, on a really cool interactive community board, basically a digital replication of the kind of boards that you would see where you could post stickies if you've ever been to an in-person community workshop. So you will have a chance, in addition to the comment box today and the Q&A period at the end, to give us your feedback on what you've seen so far. But for the rest of the presentation, we're going to be focusing on the concept designs, the alternatives that we've developed for the redevelopment of Van Dyke. One thing I will note about these, what you'll be seeing today are really long-term redevelopment visions for the corridor. They will be supported by, in terms of the final materials that we develop, a phasing plan, a strategy for activating catalyst sites and making strategic investments. And we'll be providing some initial guidance on how to redevelop properties in terms of the long-range redevelopment and strategic infill opportunities. So that's to say that there's a lot that goes between the stage where we are today and the realization of the long-term visions that you're seeing today. In some cases, if you know Van Dyke Avenue well, the visions we're putting forward today may seem ambitious, and we certainly think that they are, and we're excited about that. But keep in mind that what you're seeing is the ultimate long-term vision. So basically, we wanted to start off, in addition to all the analysis that you saw at Community Workshop 1, and we'll be providing some summaries of how that work advanced in terms of our market study and the other factors that went into shaping these redevelopment visions. But what we looked at first was, what is the composition of the corridor today, both the character and the types of development that exist there. You can see the footprints of the buildings there today, and you can start to see some of the issues that we've outlined about the development form that's taken shape, very auto-oriented and not a lot of public space. So what we've tried to do is embrace what's there today, embrace what's working, and at the same time put together a vision that advances that in line with the community's own goals. So the first, in addition to what's on the ground today and what investments have already been made in the corridor, we wanted our redevelopment alternatives to be informed by an understanding of what's going on with the market. And this started with us evaluating the SEMCOG forecast that was developed, looking at Sterling Heights some years ago, as well as our own internal team of economists and folks who look closely at the development market to understand what trends are taking shape regionally, locally, in some cases nationally. And they provided us with some guidance about the types of uses that we should support and that we should encourage moving forward and make strategic investments in which ones to deprioritize. So what we heard from them is that for Sterling Heights in particular, and the region that you're in, new models of urban living are going to become increasingly popular among a wide variety of groups, including young professionals, empty nesters in some cases. And of course, affordability is a big part of the housing conversation going forward for Michigan, the Detroit region, and of course, nationally. And a big way that you can accomplish all of those things is through making strategic investments in the right kinds of residential products. So we're talking about things like townhomes, something that doesn't exist in great supply in Sterling Heights today. Same with condos and apartments. And these fortunately fall really well in line with the goals we have to establish a urban district here. Multifamily acting as a buffer or really transitioning between existing single family uses and multifamily. We've started to incorporate some of those themes in the work. In terms of retail and commercial, there's a lot of leakage that's taking place right now, meaning a lot of the dollars that live in Sterling Heights are going outside the city to buy and to seek entertainment. So we want to try to capture more of that. And we think that this corridor is a good place to start. Aligned with placemaking concepts, these are increasingly desirable. We find everywhere we work, people want to exist, to live and work in real places that offer them a variety of things to do and see and experience, and have in close proximity a lot of those things that they need to live their lives. Focusing on entertainment, convenience, and experience-based uses, there's just not a lot of that happening in the city today. Again, that aligns really well with our other goals. And then in terms of those segments, we should probably look to deprioritize industrial uses. Obviously, Sterling Heights is a big industrial place. The city is well known for it, and it's a big economic driver. We do find a little bit of compatibility issues with some of the major industrial uses and what else we're trying to do here. So we're looking for a nice fusion between these two to preserve those authentic aspects of the city while prioritizing a new way forward for this area specifically. And then office, what we learned is that the market's just not there, not quite as hot as some of the other areas. So for the purposes of our work and looking at the medium to long-term future, We have incorporated some of this, but not a lot. Another finding, which we realized early on, is that Van Dyke Avenue is a very long corridor, about 1.3 to 1.5 miles from bottom to top. And what we realized is when we looked at a bunch of different comparison communities and urban districts that have been successful in the region, is that we really need to think about this at a different scale. So we started to break up Van Dyke Avenue into what we saw as some of these sub-districts. And you'll see this come into play in the alternatives that we've developed. And what we did with these sub-districts, after we had the chance to speak with members of the community through the first engagement, the workshop that we hosted in October, as well as some focus groups and the opportunity mapping exercise that we launched online and the surveys that we sent out, we started to collect all of this feedback from the community and mix it with some conversations we were having with key stakeholders. And we started to look for places where we could integrate all of these different components, well, not all of them, but as many of them as we thought might work here and tie into a larger vision for the future of the corridor. And so we started to define these districts around what might work there and what kind of character could take shape. So each one of these items that you see here either came from the community or from our own research into placemaking and what we think would work. And you'll start to see these get located within each of the two concepts that we'll show you today. In addition to looking at the kind of broader regional opportunities, we also want to look on site for where the low-hanging fruit might be. Where are the places where we could potentially catalyze the long-term vision and take on early projects to build on what's working and to basically take advantage of what opportunities are present. So we took a look at all the different properties on the site, and we put some criteria in front of ourselves and said, okay, so where are the publicly owned lands? Where are those properties that are, there's something going on there today, but maybe it's very underutilized. Maybe there's a lot of potential for densification or new, more substantial investment. Then from a placemaking perspective, adjacency to what's going on already, location at critical intersections, at gateways, we want to see, okay, which are the properties that are located in exactly the kind of right place in order for us to kickstart something happening here. And then, of course, where are there opportunities because the parcel is vacant? So what we've started to do is look at these parcels and try to understand what opportunities exist to get started with the redevelopment. Bear with me for a moment. Some of these slides are a bit heavier than others. So after looking at the conditions on the ground, after taking a close look at what the market analytics are telling us and the community's own goals and preferences, we start to try to filter this through a series of placemaking elements. And these are the things that we've seen in our own work as planners, urban designers, landscape architects, and market-based folks. These are the things that we understand to be critical elements of making a place. So it's a place where you feel comfortable walking, a place where housing is desirable and a mix of uses take shape. And so some of these elements are, first of all, walkability and bikeability. Manisha went into this to a large extent, and it's a high priority of ours to make this a more multimodal corridor, because that's what we're hearing from the community in the city that they want to take shape here. Vegetation. Currently, there's not much going on Van Dyke Avenue. There aren't street trees to a large extent. There are some scattered foliage and quite a lot happening by the Clinton River. How can we make this a more lush and vibrant area from a vegetation perspective? Pedestrian scale. Manisha started to talk about this with the sections that we're exploring, but we really want both development and the streetscape to create a comfortable environment for people. And that takes place through a variety of interventions in terms of the way we shape development and paying close attention to the dimensions of all the components. Authenticity and identity. You know, I showed you the map of the existing properties on site today, and there is certainly an opportunity to start fresh and redevelop each parcel one by one to come in line with the vision. Some places have done that, but we really think the richness of places comes from the ability to adapt what's there, to keep pieces of the identity and to tie in to those fabrics that are working well to distinguish Sterling Heights and Van Dyke Avenue from its neighbors and other places in the region. So we want to capitalize on that. Civic space. Today, there's not much going on Van Dyke Avenue as far as places where people can gather, where civic events can take shape. We're looking closely at opportunities for that to come in line with the density. A mix of uses. We don't want this to just be a commercial and industrial corridor as it largely is today. We want it to accommodate a variety of nicely compatible uses and ensure that a lot of different kinds of things can take shape in the future. Commercial activation. We certainly want to see this become an economically successful place, more so than it is today. And so we're looking carefully at where we can concentrate commercial activity and make it a vibrant shopping retail area. Flexibility. We know that the world is changing all the time. COVID has shown us the ways in which our planning and urban design ideas need to be kind of rethought to some degree when issues like this arise. So flexibility becomes increasingly important in the public realm and in terms of establishing a framework vision that can evolve over time. Density. Right now, the corridor is anything but dense. It's very suburban in form, which means there are these giant setbacks and large kind of distributed parking areas, mostly in front of buildings. What we want to see is a density take shape that creates that nice scale and creates a kind of creative chaos, a friction that is enjoyable and really characteristic of urban places. And then porosity. We don't want blank walls facing the street. We don't want unwelcoming or unapproachable development to take shape. We really want an environment that pushes the public uses towards the street and creates a public place in the street. So these are just some of the ideas that are guiding our work, and we thought you should understand how our ideas are kind of situating in this overall framework. So if those are the kind of elements of placemaking, we also are starting to translate those into real place-based strategies for redeveloping the corridor. And we'll walk you through a couple of those that directly informed the two alternatives that we developed. The first is this idea of transitioning from the context. There's a lot of successful neighborhoods and districts in Sterling Heights today, and we want to build off that, and we want to be good neighbors to those people who are already established nearby. So there's a lot of residential neighborhoods, and there's quite a bit of industrial activity nearby, and you'll see the ways in which we start to negotiate between what we hope will come here and what exists already. Reinforce the core. We have a real opportunity with two primary city streets, or streets within Sterling Heights, that are carrying some car traffic today and create opportunities to shape new spaces at the center of the site and create a really vibrant core. We want to build on the local assets, whether they be on-site or closely adjacent. Everything from the foot traffic that Jimmy John's Field will experience and people going to Utica Town Center, the great investment in the Clinton River Heritage Park, and of course the larger Clinton River Greenway. It's a tremendous asset having that intersect with our site here. Forthcoming developments, we're really excited to see the Chaldean Foundation's multifamily mixed-use project come on site pretty close to our core here. It's exactly the kind of development that we're recommending take shape in the future, so it's a great catalyst project. Of course, existing diverse commercial activity on site. There's a lot of interesting things happening already that can be built upon. The Sterling Heights Nature Center, great interpretive center for the Clinton River and Greenway. We can start to tie into that in meaningful ways. And of course, the existing industry that's taking shape off site. The Ford transmission plant and some of the other industrial uses there do create an opportunity to plug into that, that real authentic heritage of Sterling Heights. We also want to talk about the street. We went into this in some detail with you already, but basically the idea here is to share the street, make it so that it's not just a zone for cars, but for people and cyclists and all kinds of future transportation mobility solutions. You can see this little diagram that we sometimes use to describe this idea. Effectively, we want to flip the paradigm. The current condition is cars are on top and everything else is kind of secondary or tertiary to that. We really want to flip that around, create more of a balance and an environment that more intentionally supports the people who would be walking and biking here in the future. Part of that is establishing a green network as well. This is both a quality of place consideration as well as a performative condition. We really want to create spaces that can accommodate stormwater, accommodate runoff, become real ecological and sustainability performance spaces, and the larger strategy to connect it all together and create a really unique park system that builds off the great asset that is the Clinton River Greenway. We want to concentrate activity. So knowing, once again, that this is a pretty large site and that there is an opportunity to establish some sub-districts within the larger district, where can we strategically think about encouraging commercial and retail activity so as to ensure that it's building upon itself and that those catalytic projects create the maximum benefit moving forward. And finally, mark the gateways. So we're establishing a new district here at Van Dyke Avenue. It's going to be a different place from its context. And one of the best ways to signal that and to create a place-based solution to announce the arrival into a place like this is with strategic gateway installations interventions and being smart about the way that you mark those gateways. Oh, I'm sorry, one more. The last one is flipping the parking paradigm. So we talked about flipping the street paradigm a little bit, where cars were no longer the one-all use for the streets, but we want the development parcels to accommodate that new vision for the future of the corridor as well. So instead of having these kind of large setbacks with parking out front, we want to look for opportunities to flip that around, push the buildings to the street's edge, and create a shared parking, smarter parking strategy in the back of these parcels. So with that, those are the kind of place-based solutions that we're looking at. When we get into the two concept alternatives, there are going to be a lot of numbers in terms of the development that we're taking a look at. And we want to be conscious of what we think the corridor can support moving forward. And right now we're showing the long-term vision, but ultimately we'll want to peel that away into its various layers and the different phases that'll go into redevelopment. We don't need to get into the detail of what you're seeing here, but what we will tell you is that we're taking a close look at a variety of different ways of understanding how much can be supported here. We're starting by looking at the city's own projections for future land uses, which tell us a little bit about what the city wanted to see during the master planning project a few years ago. We want to translate that into the development capacity. So there are acreages today, and then using zoning, what can that accommodate in terms of actual square footage? We filter that through our own market analysis and our understanding of the kind of trends and the forecasted needed uses. And then we calculate the development that our alternatives would project come to this area. And we then cater our implementation to understand exactly how to support that level of investment and that level of development.